I recently returned from a trip to Japan with my family. It was our first time there, and like many Indians who've dreamed of visiting that precise, poetic country, I had built up my certain expectations. Things like temples which are wrapped in silence, or cities that breathe order, or people who bow in kindness. And yes, Japan delivered on those fronts. But it also surprised me in ways I did not see coming. More than just a travel experience, it turned into a mirror, one that reflected not just Japan's strengths, but also India's gaps and our possibilities. From the moment we stepped into the country, I was struck by a kind of calm discipline I had never quite encountered earlier. Everything had its place. Trains were silent and arrived on time, and not close to time, and not approximately on time, but exactly on time. People lined up in queues without being told to. Even when they were in a rush, there was no pushing, there was no shouting, no citing at delays because there were no delays. It was a society built on mutual respect and quiet consistency. And then came the small things that hit harder than the big ones. We were staying in a city called Kyoto, and one morning I stepped out early for a walk. I noticed an elderly man, perhaps in his late 70s, sweeping leaves from street outside his home. Not a municipal worker, just a man with a broom and a sense of ownership. So I paused to watch. He swept not just his front yard, but extended the courtesy to the sidewalk. It was subtle but deeply moving. In that simple act was an ethic. Like, this is my space, and therefore my responsibility. It reminded me painfully of how we in India treat public spaces as someone else's problem. So streets become dustbins, parks become dumping grounds. The idea of shared responsibility is often replaced with blame and neglect. ये मेरा काम नहीं है. It's not my work. How often have we said that or heard it? But here in this quiet Kyoto lane, I saw the opposite. It's not my job, but I'll still do it. That mindset is culture in action. Another moment that stayed with me was during a meal at a small family run restaurant in Osaka. We had ordered a vegetarian meal, and seeing our hesitation with some unfamiliar items, the chef came out. She was an elderly woman with a warm smile and patient eyes. Through gestures and broken English, she explained every ingredient, every process, and every even offered to remake one dish without the fish broth we did not realize was included. There was no irritation, no defensiveness, just pure grace. Before leaving, I bowed to thank her. She bowed lower, and then she said something I'll never forget. Thank you for coming so far. Please tell others we are happy you came. That's not hospitality, that's human connection. Contrast that with the rushed, sometimes indifferent experiences we often face at restaurants in India, even the fancy ones. We get service, but rarely warmth. And perhaps that's what Japan teaches us, that dignity lies not just in how we serve, but in how we care while serving. Whether you're a chef, a janitor, or a train attendant, your work reflects your soul. And when people believe that, societies change. But let me not romanticize this too much. Japan is not perfect. As the days passed, I also noticed a different kind of tension beneath the surface. A silence that wasn't always peaceful. People rarely expressed frustration, even when clearly inconvenienced. Emotions were seemingly managed, not shared. Rules were followed, but often without room for personal flexibility. The culture, while beautiful, could sometimes feel rigid, and that made me long for India with all its chaos, contradictions, and colors. In India, if your suitcase is too heavy, someone will help, not out of duty, but out of instinct. If you are lost, five people will give you five directions, five different directions. It's messy, it's noisy, but it's undeniably human. We don't just offer help, we offer stories, we offer opinions, relationships, whether you want them or not. And that made me realize something really important, that India and Japan are not opposite ends of the same spectrum. They are different instruments playing different kinds of music. One is a quiet flute, which is Japan. The other is a roaring dhol, which is India. Both can move you, but in very different ways. Yet, here's where the comparison becomes painful. India often hides behind this emotional richness to excuse civic dysfunction. We glorify our spirit, we glorify our warmth and our resilience, and yes, they are real and valuable. But they also not clean streets. They do not build footpaths. They do not ensure public safety or punctuality or functioning public transport. And we must stop telling ourselves they are enough. Because the truth is that kindness is not a replacement for competence. Generosity does not fix broken systems. Being adaptable is not a substitute for accountability. The Japanese are not better than us because of their race or genes or ancient wisdom. They are better at certain things because they have chosen, generation after generation, to value order, to value responsibility, and respect for others in everyday life. So the question is, what have we chosen to value? In many cases, we've chosen survival over system. We've chosen convenience over consistency, shortcuts over standards, and that shows. So we blame the government blames the people, and somewhere in this endless loop of blame, we normalize the decay. But travel shows you what's possible. It makes you uncomfortable with what you've accepted for far too long. Japan made me uncomfortable, but in the best way, because it reminded me that cultures are not carved in stone, they are shaped by repetition, they're shaped by reinforcement and role models. And we need new role models, people who don't just complain about India's problems, but fix one small thing around them. People who don't say, "This is India, what can you do?" but say, "Yes, this is India, and I am doing this anyway." We need to see the old man in Kyoto sweeping the street, not as a foreign oddity, but as a mirror. We need to raise our children to believe that cleaning up after yourself is not a favor to society. It's the bare minimum that you want. We need to stop treating rules as inconveniences. We need to stop glorifying the idea of breaking lines, bypassing laws, or getting things done through influence. We need to stop laughing when someone says, India works despite the rules, because that's not a compliment. That's like an obituary of systems. One day, while traveling on a local train in Japan, I was standing near the door holding onto a handrail. An elderly man stepped in. I instinctively offered him the space where I was standing, which was closer to the seat, easier to balance. He smiled, bowed, and refused gently. And he said, "You are guest in our country. Please keep your place." Now, this wasn't just politeness, it was a worldview that respect is not just for the elderly, but for everyone. And that being a host carries responsibility, not superiority. How many of us think that way? In India, how often do we treat guests with reverence, but treat each other with indifference? The Japanese do not make this distinction. Their respect is not reserved for occasion, it's a daily practice, and that's something I love to bring back. Does this mean we need to become like Japan? No. We don't need to lose our madness, our music, or our messy joy, but we do need to evolve. We need to combine our spirit with the systems, our heart with their habits, our emotion with their work ethic. We've overtaken Japan in GDP size, but the real growth we need is in how we show up for each other. And not just in families, but in communities and the society. Not just in temples, but in traffic. Not just when someone is watching, but especially when no one is. I came back from Japan not with envy, but with clarity that culture is a daily vote. And every time you litter or cut a line or ignore a red light, you're casting a vote for the different kind of India you want. Every time you pick up after yourself or stop to help someone or respect a rule, you're casting another kind of vote. So, no, I don't think the Japanese are better than Indians, but I do believe they've made better collective choices in many areas. And those choices have compounded over decades. That's what we're seeing today, which is a result of 100 years of choosing dignity over disorder. And we can start doing the same right now in small ways, in our homes, in our offices, in our mindset. Travel is not about comparison, it's about inspiration, about coming home and asking, how can I live better now that I have seen what is possible? So here's my final thought. We don't need to become Japan, but we do need to stop using our chaos as a shield. Stop making excuses for our filth, our indiscipline, our apathy. India is capable of greatness, not just in economic numbers or space missions or unicorn startups, but in how we treat each other, in how we build our streets and roads, in how we wait at a red light when no one's watching. The greatness of a nation is not just in what it builds, but in what it tolerates. And maybe the best journeys are not the ones that make you fall in love with another country, but the ones that help you fall in love with your own again, and not for what it is, but for what it can still become. Thank you so much for your time.